Joining us now is Professor Mia Bloom. She is the International Security Fellow at New America and professor at Georgia State University and co-author of Pastels and Pedophiles: Inside the Mind of QAnon, Stanford University Press. Professor Bloom, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
The pleasure is mine. I am the title, Pastels and Pedophiles, and at first I'm like, I didn't understand the thing you said, QAnon, and then it all made sense. Help us to understand the book and the top subject matter.
Part of the idea is that, when you're looking at QAnon, they are completely obsessed with this idea that there is a cabal, an elite cabal of pedophiles that are running the world. And for them, the elite cabal includes Democrats and the Royal Windsor family, the Bush family, Hollywood, but they're constantly talking about pedophilia because that has a triggering effect. And especially when they're trying to recruit women, it almost activates their maternal instinct. And so calling someone a pedophile is the worst thing that you can do. Like, that's the worst name you can call them, which is one of the reasons why they're constantly calling Joe Biden a pedophile. But the idea also with pastels is that this is about women. So it's a way in which that they are portraying their involvement as keyboard warriors, but in these softer, light colored hues.
No, that is fascinating. And as you discuss how it triggers the maternal instinct, it becomes almost an instant recruiting tool, at least getting past their initial rejection to the conspiracy side. It's almost like a gateway into the psyche of people who are triggered by that accusation of pedophilia.
It's absolutely a gateway. And I'm so glad that one of the pictures you just showed was about Save the Children, because last year around this time is when they started the Save the Children campaign. And of course, and it's interesting because I've been studying terrorism for over 3 decades. This is how ISIS recruited women as well. Did you want to save the children of Syria? Did you want to help the orphans? And of course the women said, of course I want to help the orphans. Who's going to say no to that question? So what we did though was, as I mentioned it in the book just in passing, but I really needed data to show that this was the case. The Save the Children campaign was really focused and targeted towards white suburban women who had started to move away from President Trump. And the images that the Save the Children showed, and they talked about trafficking, which is genuinely a problem, but all the kids that they showed were white. And when you look at the charity Save the Children, 99.5% of the children are not white.
Wow.
And so this was really, there's this racial undertone that not only is QAnon anti-Semitic, but it is really racist too.
We're gonna have to talk about this for a long time to come because there's so many things that are overlaying this, right? The fact that in their recruiting process, they would need to use white children because they know their base. And they know that humanity that they extend, that maternalistic instinct might be diminished a little bit because of that racism. And so they can't get the same results if they use the same children that are actually the targets of trafficking. Could you just, I know you said it once, but could you talk about that more? Because that's terrifying.
So it's absolutely the case. I mean, and there have been some very thoroughly researched studies that for white women, they do not see children of color in the same way as they see white children. And they don't empathize the same way, they don't relate this, they don't see, oh, that's just like my 5-year-old if they're seeing a 5-year-old child of color. And we've seen this with, calling the police because someone is selling lemonade or bottles of water or having a barbecue. This emergence in the last 2 years of these Karens, or barbecue Becky's or whatever the name is of the week. When it's certain kinds of white women, they do not see children in the same way based on the color of their skin. But I mentioned it in the book, but I needed data. So what we did is we actually went back and we looked at Save the Children, the charity, and we have all of their images. Then we looked at what QAnon talked about in Save the Children, and then we had the data. And side by side, it's really shocking.
So what do you see that? Have you seen any research or done any research yourself as to what they can attribute that to in terms of the white women's maternal instinct being diminished because of the race and the lack of, is it, I don't think it's intrinsic, Do you think it is cultural? Is it a product of the system that so much dehumanization of Black people has occurred in this country that it's almost like that's another vestige of Jim Crow and slavery, is that they just simply cannot see us as human?
I think that's absolutely part of it. In fact, so I had read this article and I have it in front of me, so I wanted to make sure that I gave credit to all the authors. But the article is called "The Essence of Innocence: Consequences of Dehumanizing Black Children." And so I'm gonna send that to you because I think you'll find it really interesting. It is an academic article written by a number of people, including Carmen Marie Cullota at Penn State and Natalie DiTomaso at UPenn, but also Philip Goff at the University of California. So it's got a lot of authors. It's a very systematic and scholarly study, but in psychology. And so we've seen time and time again, whether it's that or Anila Rotland has written about race and fragility in the legal distinction between juveniles and adults, with the juveniles of color versus the white juveniles. So part of what I was trying to do with this book is that Sophia and I are both academics. And if I was gonna give you this to read, it's really chewy with the footnotes and some of the terminology. We wanted to break it down because with the current number of people who believe in QAnon, it's probably about 30 million Americans who believe in some element of QAnon, which means that everybody has a cousin or a friend or a coworker that is consuming this material. But what we also started to see is they are targeting communities of color. And I thought, if the communities of color know how racist QAnon is, maybe we can inoculate them. They'll still want to save children, but they won't want to be involved in QAnon.
Oh, that's absolutely brilliant. And actually, I'm going to get a copy of that book because we do see this recruitment happening. And I think one of the layers that does protect is this we don't necessarily need the data because we know QAnon is aligned with the right wing in this country, with conservatism, with Donald Trump, and but to have the data, I think would be an inoculant, because that conspiracy theory, once you get past that maternal instinct or that paternal instinct and you get right past that, it doesn't matter, that racism could be ignored. Where can we get the book? And where can I pick it up today?
Well, the book. So we actually, I'll give you an example. So ordinarily, University Press books are really expensive. We asked them, please make it cheap. So it's 20 bucks on Amazon or Barnes and Noble or anywhere you get your books. It's also, there's an ebook, so you can download it. And the idea is that as much as we associate QAnon with Donald Trump because the cabal of blood drinking pedophiles in Hollywood, and they're always talking about Hillary Clinton and Bill Gates and George Soros and the usual boogeymen for the conspiracy theorists. But 6% of people who identify as Democrats also believe in QAnon, because when they started the Save the Children campaign, it jumped to Instagram and it started being promoted by vegans and women who practice yoga, and we call those the QAmoms. And now we have people who are formerly supporters of Bernie Sanders in QAnon. And some of the more famous people who have left that have done the talk show circuit, like Glenka Perone, she was a Bernie lady before she was QAnon. And they may not even realize how many of these tropes. So, and I'm just gonna blow your mind, Benjamin, for one last thing. There's a series of posters. It's a white child and there's a hand over its mouth so it can't scream, and the kid is looking terrified. 10 different versions of this. In 9 of 10 of the versions, the child is white and the hand is black or brown.
I want to open a can of worms because I can't even go. I can't go back to that one, Professor Bloom. You trying to get me out of character as a professional here. But I do want to ask you something that we may have to have a part 2 of this conversation. Do you see, and you're a fellow in international security, do you see any overlap in this, what I saw someone on Twitter refer to as a pan-reactionary movement? Do you see anything on the global stage that mirrors this QAnon frenzy that's to internationalize it? Is it just an American phenomenon, or do you see something on the international stage that mirrors it?
No, absolutely. So in chapter 5 of the book, we talked about the contagion effect, that QAnon has jumped the shark. It has gone from the United States and Canada to the UK and France and Germany. And now it's all over the world. It's in 85 different countries. And so when I'm inside the encrypted platform, seeing what they're talking about, I'm seeing QAnon in Russian, I'm seeing it in Hebrew, I'm seeing it in German, and I'm seeing it in Hindi. And this is where we have to realize no conspiracy theory has ever become a global movement the way this one is going.
Wow. Professor Mia Bloom, that is terrifying, that is sobering, but I do believe that this conversation, along with others, especially with that inoculant in terms of the people of color, I think that can actually stem the tide here. So thank you so much for your book and for your work, and thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me, Benjamin. It was a pleasure meeting you.
The pleasure's ours.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.